The sun had barely risen over JFK Airport when Alexandria Cole stepped into the terminal wearing a sleek navy blue pantsuit that hinted at wealth but didn't scream for attention. Her presence, after all, did that for her. The founder and CEO of Vertilux Technologies, a $3.2 billion logistics software powerhouse. Alexandria was en route to San Francisco to close a deal with a defense contractor, a deal worth hundreds of millions. She traveled frequently, always first class, not just because she could, but because she'd earned it 10 times over. As she handed over her boarding pass at the gate, the young agent gave her the once-over with that barely concealed look of condescension black professionals knew too well. "You're flying first class?" she asked, as if Alexandria had somehow wandered into the wrong line. "Yes," Alexandria answered coolly, her voice polished like steel under velvet. "Do you need to see my ID too? Or is the $8,000 seat not enough proof?" The agent flushed, but allowed her through. She took her seat in 2A and opened her laptop to review final merger documents. Minutes later, as passengers continued boarding, a white man in a tailored suit approached, visibly confused, and looked down at her. "Excuse me, I think you're in my seat," he said, flashing a pearly smile. "No," she replied without looking up. "You're in to B. This is 2A." But before the man could argue, a flight attendant rushed over with a tight smile and whispered something to him. Then, turning to Alexandria, the attendant said, "Ma'am, I'm afraid there's been a last-minute change in seat assignments." Alexandria blinked. "I chose this seat weeks ago. It's not a change, it's a downgrade. Why am I being moved?" The attendant gave that rehearsed smirk that hid passive aggression. "Well, this gentleman is a Platinum Elite Plus member, and his seat is malfunctioning. As a courtesy, we're moving you to business class." "You're moving me to accommodate him?" she asked, her voice rising just enough for nearby passengers to listen. "I'm a first-class passenger with a confirmed seat. There's no malfunction. You're choosing to move me." The flight attendant bristled. "Ma'am, please don't make a scene." A white woman across the aisle chuckled. The man grinned like it was a joke. Alexandria stood up, towering at nearly 6 feet in heels, and said in a voice both calm and commanding, "I am Alexandria Cole, CEO of Vertilux. My company is this airline's largest logistics client. We process and optimize over 60% of your international cargo. If I sit in business class, your boardroom will hear about it." The attendant, clearly rattled now, tried to salvage the moment. "I wasn't aware, Ms. Cole." "Of course you weren't," she interrupted. "That's the point." She walked off the plane with dignity, her phone already in hand, thumb hovering over the contact labeled Aviation Vendor Relations Priority. By the time she reached the gate again, she was no longer just a passenger, denied dignity. She was a storm forming over the head of an arrogant airline, about to learn the price of disrespecting the wrong black woman in a first-class world. Alexandria Cole's heels clicked crisply against the polished tile of the departure gate as she moved with the composed fury of a woman who had long since mastered the art of turning insult into influence, humiliation into heat. She wasn't just angry, she was activated. And when Alexandria moved like this, corporations crumbled and egos were reduced to ash. Sliding into the privacy of the VIP lounge without so much as glancing at the front desk clerk, who looked up only to recognize her far too late, she tapped the name on her phone screen that had ended contracts, launched audits, and greenlit million-dollar transfers with a single voicemail. "Derek," she said, the moment the line picked up. Her voice low, lethal, and smooth. "Pull the full cargo logistics contract we have with Sunstream Airlines, all $120 million of it. Put it on immediate hold pending executive review, and flag it under client misconduct. Yes, this is a freeze. Effective now." On the other end, Derek barely exhaled. Understood. Do you want me to notify their executive relations? No, she said. I'll do that myself. And Derek? Yes, ma'am. Prepare a press statement. Soft language for now. Just enough to make them nervous. We'll escalate later, depending on how they respond. Hanging up, she opened her inbox, drafting a curt, surgical email to the airline's vice president of strategic accounts, whom she had personally toasted champagne with during their last cargo expansion deal. Her message was brief, bearing the icy tone of a woman tired of polite excuses, effective immediately. All contracts between Vertilux Technologies and Sunstream Airlines are frozen pending internal investigation into discriminatory treatment of senior personnel. Details to follow. Not 5 minutes passed before her phone began to vibrate non-stop. First came the automated "We're so sorry" email from the airline's customer care team and signed. Sterile and insultingly vague. Then came the first phone call from a blocked number. Then another and another. Alexandria ignored each one as she slowly sipped her green tea from the lounge bar and scrolled through social media. Already trending with hashtags like #FirstClassWhileBlack and #CEO and Coach, as a nearby teenager's TikTok showing the confrontation on the plane racked up thousands of views per minute. It was one thing to humiliate a paying passenger. It was another to humiliate a powerful black woman with a global platform and partners who paid attention. Within the hour, the president of the airline's North American division was leaving voicemails with increasing desperation. "Ms. Cole, please, we are investigating this. This is not who we are." Followed minutes later by another, "We're hoping to speak directly with you and correct this oversight immediately." Oversight, that word. As if her identity had been accidentally erased, not deliberately dismissed. Alexandria didn't respond. Not yet. She let them stew, made them wait, because she knew the silence of a powerful black woman wasn't passive, was pressure. It was negotiation. It was leverage. And the longer they squirmed, the more control she had. Eventually, one of her senior advisors texted, "They've requested an emergency meeting. Shall I forward it to legal?" She replied simply, "No, send it to me. I want to see their faces sweat." Minutes later, she was in a private Zoom call with 5 red-faced executives in suits and corporate panic. They apologized, groveling through scripts like men who suddenly realized the earth beneath their feet was leased, not owned. "This was an unfortunate misunderstanding," Ms. Cole once said. "Our team wasn't aware of who you were. That's the problem," she cut in. "You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with basic human respect. I didn't need to be a CEO for that seat to be mine. I only needed to be a paying customer. But the moment you saw me as disposable, I became something else up." Reminder that your contracts are earned, not guaranteed. Another executive chimed in, "We'd like to offer you a public apology, an upgrade package, and a renewal incentive for our partnership." She stared directly into the camera, her gaze unwavering. "I don't want an upgrade. I want a culture shift. I want every gate agent retrained, every protocol reviewed, and every employee reminded that bias has a cost, and in this case, it's $120 million and climbing." Silence fell. She leaned forward slightly. "You've got 48 hours to deliver a plan, or I walk, and trust me, my partners will walk with me." When the meeting ended, she stood in that VIP lounge, composed and commanding. She had made one call, frozen 9 figures, and turned what was meant to be a quiet act of erasure into a national moment of reckoning. But Alexandria knew this wasn't over. The apology was pending, the pressure mounting. She was no longer just one woman with power. She was every black woman who had ever been told, "You don't belong here," and answered by taking the whole building down to the studs. By morning, the media storm was in full force. Alexandria hadn't said a word publicly. Yet the narrative had already caught fire and blazed across news feeds. Hashtags, LinkedIn articles, podcasts, and business blogs with the kind of momentum no PR department could contain. Black CEO demoted for white passenger, the headlines blared. Discrimination at 35,000 feet. Some read. The footage from the flight had been dissected frame by frame, her calm dignity, the condescension in the flight attendants. Voice, the smirks, the arrogant assumption that she didn't belong where her money and merit had placed her. In boardrooms across the country, executives whispered nervously, wondering if their companies had contracts with her firm or similar clients. Influencers, entrepreneurs, and Fortune 500 diversity officers began sharing the story as a case study. In systemic bias, because Alexandria hadn't just frozen a contract, she had activated a movement. Still, Alexandria remained quiet, not because she lacked something to say, but because she understood the power of silence when everyone else was speaking for you. That morning, the airline finally released an official statement, a 3-paragraph mess of corporate jargon that referred to her as a valued customer, apologized for a lapse in protocol, and announced an internal review. There was no mention of race, no acknowledgement of power, no admission of the blatant discrimination at play. Just sterile language and an offer of compensation, which they declined to specify. Alexandria read it once, then twice, and then closed the tab without blinking. They still didn't get it. This wasn't about money or a seat or her title, it was about dignity and the cost of ignoring it. Her phone buzzed again, this time from a well-known journalist at a national morning show. They wanted her for an exclusive interview. "We'd love to hear your side of the story, Alexandria," the message read. "America needs to hear your voice on this." She declined. Not yet. Instead, she convened her executive leadership team virtually on an emergency strategy call. "I want a task force formed," she told them. "One that identifies every airline, every vendor, every contractor whose company culture fails to align with our values. If they're not actively fighting bias, we're cutting ties. We don't need to fix broken systems, we'll build better ones without them." Her CFO, a brilliant Ghanaian woman named Miriam, spoke up. "Should we escalate this contract freeze into a full termination?" Alexandria paused, then nodded slowly. "Yes, but not yet. Let them see the ceiling crack before we bring the whole thing down." That same day, several Fortune 100 CEOs reached out privately. Some offered apologies on behalf of the industry. Others extended invitations for panels and summits and day collaborations. But Alexandria saw through most of its crumbling reputations, not sincere reconciliation. Then came the call she had been waiting for, the airline CEO, a white man with decades of executive experience. The type whose name came with private jets and country club board memberships. He didn't waste time with platitudes. "Ms. Cole, this is unacceptable. We're embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. And I want to make this right. Can you change the past?" she asked, her tone even but edged with steel. "No," he admitted. "But I can change what we do next." She allowed a moment of silence before speaking, then began by accepting that this isn't just a PR disaster. This is a cultural failure. "Your airline saw me, a black woman, and assumed I didn't belong. That assumption is more than offensive, it's expensive." He agreed to everything: a full review, mandatory bias training for every employee, an audit of racial disparity in service complaints, and a multi-million-dollar donation to organizations empowering women of color in tech and aviation. But Alexandria wasn't moved by money. She wanted accountability. "You're not doing this for me," she said. "You're doing it because you now understand that people like me hold power to, and we're not afraid to use it." He had no reply. "Until these commitments are implemented and verified independently," she continued, Our contracts remain frozen. I've given your competitors a courtesy call. They're hungry for our business. Consider this your grace period." After the call ended, she leaned back in her chair and exhaled, not in relief, but in calculation. She had struck the match, watched it burn, and now she would determine how much of the forest deserved to be cleared. That evening, Alexandria posted a single sentence on her verified account: "Never let them mistake your silence for permission." Within minutes, it had gone viral. Activists praised her. Black professionals across industries called her a blueprint. Young girls saw her and understood they didn't have to shrink themselves for a seat; they could build the plane. But Alexandria wasn't finished. No, not yet. The apology had come, but justice had a longer runway and she was just now picking up speed. 3 weeks later, Alexandria Cole walked through the sleek glass doors of the Global Aviation Equity Summit. Her presence part legend, part reckoning. The conference, once a tightly gated industry affair, dominated by white male executives in tailored suits, now buzzed with a very different kind of energy. All eyes turned as she entered, not because of what she wore, a flawless black pantsuit with custom gold cuffs engraved with the word unapologetic, but because the entire room knew she had done what few had dared. She had held an entire industry to account with one call, one pause, and one refusal to be moved. The fallout had been seismic. After she froze the $120 million contract, 3 other companies quietly pulled out of their own deals with Sunstream Airlines. A class action suit had been filed by former employees detailing years of quiet discrimination swept under corporate rugs. The airline's stock dipped, board members resigned, and the CEO who had once called her personally stepped down under health reasons. But Alexandria hadn't celebrated. Not yet, because this wasn't about one airline or one humiliation. It was about the thousands of daily indignities people like her endured, whether in a first-class cabin or a corner office. And today, she wasn't here just to speak. She was here to change the course of the air itself. As she took the stage for the keynote, the lights dimmed and the room fell into silence. The kind of hush usually reserved for royalty or revolutionaries. She looked out across the sea of suits and sharpened her voice like a blade. "I didn't come here to be applauded. I came here because the sky is still segregated." Murmurs stirred. She went on. "You claim to champion innovation, to chase excellence. But what innovation exists in excluding people who've already earned their seat? What excellence exists in silence when discrimination boards your flights every day?" A few executives looked down. Others leaned in. "I was removed from a seat I paid for, not because of a mistake, but because of a mindset. A system that sees black women as disruptions instead of destinations." Her words hit with the precision of truth. She walked slowly across the stage. "But here's what you didn't expect. You didn't expect that black woman to be a CEO. You didn't expect her to freeze your contracts, rewire your reputation, or walk into your boardrooms with better offers in her hand. You thought I'd sit down quietly. You thought I'd move." She paused. "But I didn't move. I moved you." Applause erupted, not polite clapping, but the thunder of realization breaking loose. She continued, "Power is not what you hold in your hands. It's what you do when you're told you have none and choose to build anyway. I didn't just want justice. I wanted a shift, and it's already begun." She then revealed the initiative she'd spent the last 2 weeks building behind closed doors. Flight Forward, a multi-million-dollar coalition of black and brown entrepreneurs, tech innovators, and aviation specialists dedicated to creating alternatives to legacy carriers that had long dismissed them. They would offer charter services, invest in aerospace startups, and train the next generation of pilots and crew centered on inclusion, not reaction. "If you won't fly us with respect," she said, "we'll fly ourselves with purpose." That night, every news outlet ran with the headline, "She was told to move. Now she's redrawing the sky." Offers poured in. Cities asked for her to speak. Universities rewrote case studies around her story. But Alexandria remained rooted. Her life didn't change because of what was taken from her. It changed because she refused to give power to those who tried to shrink her. 1 week later, she boarded a plane again, not with fear or caution, but with clarity. As she stepped into first class, the crew stood at attention, not because of her title, not because of her wealth, but because her name now meant accountability. The pilot himself came forward, looked her in the eye, and said, "Ms. Cole, thank you for flying with us and for making all of us better." She nodded and took her seat. And this time, no one asked her to move. No one dared. Because the world finally understood, when you try to displace a black woman from her seat, she doesn't just find another. She owns the runway.